morning, everybody, and welcome to episode 3 of our In Conversation webinars. My name is Paul North from the UK-ASEAN Business Council, and I'm joined here by our events manager, Veronica, who has been behind organising today's event. Today we have with us a very special guest, Neil Payne, founder and owner of Commisceo, and they are a consultancy and training provider with expertise in the areas of working globally, cultural awareness skills and international training. And we'll be hearing from Neil. Just before we do, just to let you know that you can send in at any time questions through the question box in the lower right hand corner of the webinar dashboard, and we will endeavour to answer those during or after the discussion that we have with Neil. Just to start by saying that we, UK-ABC, we help companies of all sizes build new contacts, build market insights, and raise the awareness of the vast commercial opportunities in what is the fastest growing region in the world. We also bring ASEAN to the UK through a sustained calendar of events, so please watch this space. I do encourage you all to visit our website, ukabc.org.uk, where there's a huge amount of information on doing business in ASEAN, and has there also along with our forthcoming events program. So without further ado, good morning, Neil, and welcome.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
No, you're more than welcome, Neil. I mean, we've been to several events this year, and I've been very fortunate there to listen to your presentations on cultural awareness. They've been absolutely fascinating. So thanks very much for taking time out of your busy program today to talk to us and you know, give us an impression of ASEAN. So I mean, tell us a bit about yourself, Neil, your company, and what they do.
Sure. So I suppose I've got a bit of a mixed cultural background. I grew up in the Middle East, in Saudi Arabia and Kuwait, to a British father and an Iranian mother. So I am known as what's called the third culture kid. So I grew up around obviously British culture, my mum's Iranian culture, and then Arab culture as well. And also probably a lot of Indian culture as well at that time in the 70s, early 80s. I didn't realize it at the time, but growing up in that environment, obviously I was learning a lot about differences between people, and that must have informed my decision to read sociology later on in life at university. And after I did that, I actually went back to the Middle East, traveled, studied my way around the region, everywhere from Turkey down to Yemen, across to Morocco, Iran, you name it, I pretty much saw it. And then came back after that to do a master's in Middle Eastern studies, including Turkish translation. And from there I went on to start a translation and training agency, which is really focused around helping companies working abroad overcome like linguistic and cultural barriers. That did very well. We got acquired in 2014 by a competitor. And at that point, we decided to take a break in life, and we took a year off to go and explore the ASEAN region. And since then, I've been solely concentrating on Commisceo, which is a cultural awareness training. So all we do is essentially help multinational, international organizations who have you know, assets, personnel, staff working abroad. Cross-culturally, we essentially come and try and help people overcome cultural barriers. So whether that's managers and leaders working abroad, whether it's virtual teams, whether it's exporters, business development people, salespeople going to far-off flung countries trying to win back contracts, we essentially try and help them not just not make mistakes, but we try and help them understand the local culture so they can fine-tune their approach, their service, their product, so that it makes more sense to the, you know, the target market in terms of what they're trying to sell and how they're trying to sell it. So yeah, that's what Commisceo do. We do face-to-face training as well as online training, but really our focus is on trying to help people understand people from other cultures in order to improve their business performance, their reach targets, etc., etc.
Yes, yeah. No, I mean, obviously, with your family background, I was going to ask you where the interest was in ASEAN, really, but I think it's a natural progression from there. So, I mean, why was the region of interest for you, and why do you think it's interest for businesses looking to expand their international presence?
Sure, that's a good question. Yeah, I mean, we had the opportunity once we sold the business we wanted to take time off and really expose our children to the big, wide, diverse world, because we live in a part of the UK which is very undiverse, let's say, very monocultural. And ASEAN, the reason we went there was, well, I had a bit of history there in terms of I studied, if you look at the picture bottom right, I spent 6 months in Malaysian Pondok, which is like a small school system, usually in villages and jungles. So I actually took my kids back there, and that's the actual Pondok I stayed in. So my experience goes back, quite a long time, to my 20s. So I learnt Malay. I was studying Islam, but then when the opportunity came up, really to kind of take this sabbatical, this year off, the reason why I chose ASEAN was essentially because I could tell that things were really developing there. It was kind of tipped as, the next region that was going to be, experiencing an economic boom. There looked like there was a lot of movement there. So, and we were getting inquiries, especially over Singapore, Vietnam, Cambodia. So there is obviously some movement going on at that time in terms of investment going into these countries. And so that's the reason I decided to pick the area. I wanted to go and spend time there, really understand the culture, the religions, the people, the history, so that when I did come back to the UK, that I could, talk with confidence to our clients about ASEAN culture, or Malaysian or whatever culture it is. So that's the reason we chose it. And I spent time there teaching English to Muslim boys in South Thailand. We spent a lot of time exposing our kids to Buddhist teachings, trying to get them to understand the philosophy behind it, and carrying out lots of interviews with business people over there, trying to understand where they're coming from in terms of their business culture, but also some of the problems, maybe, or challenges, let's say, they face when dealing with us from the western part of the world. So yeah, it was just kind of spotted the opportunity. I had a bit of a link there anyway, and really just wanted to go and explore and understand the region properly.
Yeah, I mean, you just highlighted there a little bit that it is important that obviously people in ASEAN know how we do business as well. So there is sort of the cultural issues there, because it is important in doing business, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, because there are the cultural differences, and these can stem from national cultures, but also from functional and corporate cultures. So, I mean, just if you can give us a little bit about why cultural awareness is important in doing business there.
Sure. I think cultural awareness is really kind of wrapped up in self-awareness. And the problem with culture is it's something that's so deep down hidden that we don't really understand that we're expressing our cultures all the time in everything we do. And a big mistake a lot of especially Westerners make when they're going over to foreign parts of the world or new parts of the world they're not used to, is they don't really give any consideration to the cultural dynamic. There's this belief that business is business wherever you do it, or if there are going to be some differences, it's not going to be that much, surely. However, in the big, wide, real world, cultural differences do exist, and some of them are quite acute and do cause problems, which is why companies such as ours exist, because there's obviously a demand to fix such problems. And on that point, the vast majority of work we do is to repair problems. Very few companies actually build in cultural awareness into their strategies. Prior to send something over to China, they don't really equip them with anything. It's usually they send them to China, mistakes are made, and then they decide to invest in cultural awareness training or some sort of solution. So this points to the fact that there is an issue in terms of our understanding of culture in business. So that's at the very fundamental level, that's why it's important. But taking it the next level, it's really kind of trying to understand that there are, each of us has a different approach to how we do business, how we like to communicate, our expectations, our beliefs over, what is right, what is wrong, what is good etiquette, what is good manners. And if you don't understand these very subtle differences between the cultures, it can lead to confusions. So I'll give you some very simple examples from my personal training bag. We had an American company who were trying to export flying automobiles. It was like new technology. They had the big Chinese boss come over to a plant in America, and he was taken out in the evening. Obviously, nothing had been signed yet, but he was over for a factory tour. And when he entered the restaurant with his entourage, he asked, "Where should I sit?" And he was told by the Americans, "Oh, sit where you like, choose, sit where you're comfortable," which in American culture is, absolutely perfectly fine and normal. Maybe in the UK, it's exactly the same. The culture being that, sit where you like, and that is going to make our guest feel comfortable. However, in Chinese culture, where hierarchy is extremely important, this was a massive loss of face to the Chinese boss and his whole entourage, because he was basically expected to be given, the top seat at the top table with his right-hand man or woman, and obviously, a sense of a ceremony around his arrival. That led to a massive loss of face, and essentially they left USA the next day, cut their visit short, and it took 8 months of this company trying to repair the damage they had done. They had to come to us, obviously, which is why we found out about the story. But then it was us, trying to explain to them what they'd done wrong, raising that self-awareness over how they were acting and what they were doing, and explaining how in this context and situation they'd kind of done the wrong thing. Now, you could also argue, from the Chinese perspective, they were in America, they should have really been adopting American rules. But it just goes to show how sensitive, especially at at top levels, these sorts of things can get. Another very basic example I can give, I was working with a gaming company who were desperate to find a distributor in the Middle East, came to us and said, "We think there's some cultural problem with our sales team." It turned out that basically the sales team were going over to Dubai. They were looking for the distributor, and they were literally, having half an hour, 45 meetings, going back to the hotel, having another half hour, 45 meeting with someone else, and then leaving the country. As I said to them, "Are you not taking these people out for dinner? Are you not even taking them for a coffee, for a chat, anything?" They were like, "No, why would we do that? We're there for business." So I had to explain to them, in the Middle East, that's not how you do business. The meeting is not actually where business is done. Business is done is over coffee, over food, over, smoking a shisha, or going out together and doing something. That's where the real business gets done. So once they understood that, went back to the marketplace, took on a different approach. Within 6 months, they found their distributor. So, these are very simple fixes when you look at it from the outside. But when someone is going into a new place, a new culture, a new country, and they're not aware of all these subtle differences between cultures and how people like to do business or how they communicate, they can get lost. And they can, come back and feel very frustrated, feel like, they're not getting places. And most of the time what happens is, we have biases, and we tend to blame the other. It's like, "Oh, those foreigners, they're very slow, or they can't do this, or they can't do that, or it's not as efficient over there." And what happens is we start to let our stereotypes and biases get in the way of making good decisions. So cultural awareness is essentially about trying to get rid of those biases, trying to get rid of those stereotypes, and trying to get people to understand the place they're going into, so that they can, avoid all those potential negative consequences.
Of course. I mean, you mentioned there very much Chinese, and Chinese culture is very prominent in the region. And I thought I'd just drop one in on you here, Neil.
Go for it.
I mean, if a company was going into Singapore, and I've chosen Singapore because it's very multicultural there, and customers here, exporters, could be dealing with various different nationalities. So, I mean, guy gets on the plane, he's going into Singapore, he's got his meetings all sorted out. What should he be looking for to help him along on his journey in trying to nail a customer there to start doing business with him?
What should he be looking for?
Yeah, what should he be aware of culturally when he's talking to the different nationalities in Singapore, for instance?
Well, it's going to change from culture to culture, but like taking Singapore as an example, and really I think the ASEAN region as a whole would kind of follow suit. But one of the big things that we don't understand is the role of hierarchy in this part of the world. You know, we come from a very, not very, but we're quite egalitarian, or we strive to be egalitarian in our culture. You know, equality is a big thing for us. We've got this thing, especially within British culture, about status. You know, we don't really like people looking down or, you know, above. We've got this idea of everyone's the same. You go over to the ASEAN part of the world, you know, Singapore, it's the opposite. It's, you know, very hierarchical. People expect others to be of status, and there are certain protocols that govern how people behave with each other. So I think, you know, going into Singapore, one of the first things someone would have to understand is, you know, how does hierarchy impact who I'm dealing with? Am I dealing with a big boss? Am I dealing with a gatekeeper? Am I dealing with an information gatherer? You know, just that question alone is going to open up a lot in terms of how you're going to have to take a different approach. You know, when speaking with a boss directly, you've got a decision maker there. So you're going to be able to get feedback instantly in terms of their thoughts on ideas or suggestions. Whereas if you've got a gatekeeper or an information gatherer, you're never going to get anything of that. All you're going to get is polite smiles, you know, note taking, and you're not going to get very much feedback. If you don't understand that and you go into that sort of meeting, you're going to get very frustrated. It's like, why are they withholding from me? Why are they not, you know, telling me? And this is a very common issue for, you know, especially Westerners going into that part of the world. You know, understanding that how that flow of information actually happens, and then taking on to that next level. You know, how do meetings carry out, or how are they carried out in that part of the world? You know, small talk is a massive part of meetings there. It's not small. It's very, very big. It's all about you know, rapport, building trust, making sure that people are on the same level. So that acts as like a real glue in terms of allowing the parties present to be able to go on and talk about business. If you come from a culture where small talk is seen as just some superfluous niceties that you do right at the beginning, you know, how was your trip here? How was the weather? And then you sat there in a meeting still 25 minutes on talking about, you know, food and football. Some Westerners can misinterpret that as why are they wasting my time? And they can try and cut it short, or, you know, they'll misinterpret the behavior and they'll make a wrong call as a result of that. You know, whereas if you go into that meeting, understand that this small talk is all about them trying to understand who is the person behind you, then you can engage with it, and then it becomes part of the business process and you understand. So, you know, those are just two very simple examples. You could then go on to the whole idea of, you know, a topic of communication, decision making, values in business, all these sorts of things. So there's when you start to pick away at it, there's a lot that you can look at in terms of, you know, how different cultures approach business or approach the different facets of business.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. No, it's a huge topic in its own, and maybe we have to do another webinar at some stage. But we're always talking about the necessity for companies to visit the market on a regular basis, and you know, that's all about the trust with potential clients and distributors. I mean, just give us a little bit more on why that is important. Why should exporters sort of put that budget to one side to make regular trips into the region?
That's a really good question. And I think actually, you know, that's probably one of the big learning points people should take on board if they are going to be serious about the region, is that there's a lot of front loading, I would say, in terms of projects, time, energy, if you're going to be dealing with this sorts of region. You're going to have to put a lot of you know, blood, sweat and tears in at the beginning in order to make things happen, as opposed to doing it after the contract. The reason is, but as you say, it's about relationships. You know, these are collective cultures, so they're very group orientated. They think about the group first as opposed to individuals. There's this whole concept of in-group, out-group. So if you're in the in-group, your access to information is there. If you're of the out-group, your access to information is very, very limited. So this is why relationships are absolutely key. If you've got a relationship with someone, it means that you're, by association, you're linked into some sort of informal local network in the country. And that will bring you benefits in terms of, being able to get things done, being able to get, insights that maybe others don't have, and be able to get clear information in terms of when you're communicating as well. If people trust you, they will then be able to trust you with, delicate or sensitive information. If they don't, if you're on the out group, you're always going to be getting kind of 50% of the story, 60% if you're lucky. So this is why relationship building is absolutely critical, and going out and spending time there, looking at people in the whites of their eyes, taking them out for food, conducting business meetings in terms of getting the formal stuff out of the way. It might take a little while, but once it's done, then you get the loyalty, then you get the relationship, then you get the information flow. That's when things start to get a lot easier, and you'll start to be running downhill as opposed to uphill.
Yes.
And for many Western companies, this is very uncomfortable, because it's a lot of expense up front. They're not necessarily there's no guarantees there at the end of the day as well. It's not necessarily our way of doing business. When we go out, look for a project, our focus is not, am I going to build a nice relationship with Mr. X or Mrs. Y? It's, can I go out and get this contract? So there needs to be a little, an adaptation in terms of the way people are thinking when they're going out there. These are very much people, heart to heart. That they feel the warmth of people, and there is very much a kind of blur between business and private. The two are together. There's no clear distinction, maybe as there are in our part of the world, between private life and public life. So going out there, spending time, creating trust, building rapport, creating building your networks, absolutely critical to short-term, medium-term, and long-term success. If you don't invest the time, and someone else, your competitor, for example, the chances are they're going to go with them, because they want to know that they can trust you, that you're going to be, a positive addition to their kind of professional, personal network, and all these sorts of things. So, if you're serious about the region, you have to be serious about spending time out there. There's no other way. You can do the remote stuff later once the relationship has been built, but you have to go out there from the beginning and let them know who you are. And actually, on that point, sorry to keep going, but while I remember it, what common mistake many businesses make is, once they've formed a relationship out there, and they might be selling a service or exporting a product, is that what they'll do is they'll change their person who's dealing with the Malay or the Cambodian. They might have got a job, might have got a different job, left the company, or might have been given a different position in their own company. But what happens is then the relationship has to go back to the beginning with a new person sent out there. So what companies find is they've got a nice bit of a flow going in terms of regular business. They change the personnel, then all of a sudden it stops, it slows down, because things start to get in the way. The reason is because they've changed the personal dynamics. So what's happening in Cambodia is they're having to go right back to square one. Is, do we trust this person? Are we able to do business with them, etc., etc., etc. So this shows the absolute importance of personal connections from people to people, heart to heart.
Absolutely, and that can affect the business as well. And it's not a simple question of somebody else picking up and sending a few emails, because they'll start wondering why they're not going to get any responses from the emails. Absolutely right. They
Absolutely.
have to visit and build up again that trust and confidence in the clients and the distributors that they're probably already dealing with.
Yeah.
Neil, so we're getting to the sort of the end of our 30 minutes here. So opportunity here just for a little bit more advice to exporting companies. What would be your 5 tips, advice for exporting companies wanting to pursue these very excellent and vast opportunities in ASEAN?
Okay. 5 tips. Well, I think the first one, let's not include it in the 5, and let's make it
Yeah.
A then, is definitely go visit, which we just touched on. Um, excuse me. If you're serious, you have to go visit. So I suppose my first tip would be first understand hierarchy. Understand how hierarchy works and the effect that has on personal dynamics. You know, um, if you're speaking, for example, if you're in a meeting and you're speaking to a group of, I don't know, Malays, you have to be very aware of who is the boss in this room or who is the most senior of these people in the room, and understand that they are going to be the only one that really talks. And if there are subordinates in the room who you actually want to hear from, it's going to be very hard for you to hear from them in an honest and open way if their boss is there. So you need to understand that hierarchy is very, 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 very important in terms of what people say, when people say it, and how people say it. So be very conscious of when you're talking to people, who you're talking to, who else is around you, and what could be stymieing actually open and honest discussion. Because people are very, very conscious of face, which is my second point. Again, this is something that we're not too bothered about in the West. This idea of protecting face, your reputation, honor. But in this part of the world, it is highly, highly sensitive. Even, a personal joke about the state of someone's hair in the morning can cause massive offense to someone because it's seen as a kind of attack on their public face and their reputation. So it's important, I would say, one, to learn to understand, to protect face. So that's things like avoiding conflict, not correcting someone's senior's mistake in front of others, these sorts of things. But not only protecting face, you need to learn to give face as well. And when I say give face, it means things like when you're around, important decision makers or, the big boss, you need to be doing things like giving them gifts, adding a sense of ceremony and protocol to how you meet them and how you give their business card, how you compliment their office, taking them and their team or their family out for food. All these sorts of things give face to people. And if you can give face to people, they're going to want more. So they're going to come back to you
Yeah.
because you're a good thing for their network. You're a good thing for that person. So try to learn to give face to people as well. Yeah. The next one I say is in
That's brilliant.
terms of the next one I say is really kind of more about decision making and maybe negotiation. Is that it's called the ASEAN way. Basically, the ASEAN way is compromise, consensus, and consultation, and this should point people to the kind of communication approach that they really need to take when they're, delivering their, point of view or trying to, negotiate a certain deal. They've got to take quite a soft, diplomatic, indirect approach. Direct, aggressive means of trying to convince people is seen as a loss of control. It's seen as a lack of class. It's seen as a lack of, you haven't really got what it takes. Do you see what I mean?
Yes.
If you're able to talk, if you're able to kind of twist people's arms through, indirect messaging or giving examples that are innuendos, those sorts of things. These are the ways that they actually give messages. So the more that you can do that, and the more that you can approach decision making as a kind of exercise in creating consensus, the better that's going to come across. So, for example, if you're trying to put a proposal to a team or a boss or someone, you'd never come out and say, this is the proposal that I want to put forward. What do you think? Because instantly you're putting them on the back foot. What you want to say is, there is this idea that is being explored, and so you're depersonalizing it. It's got nothing to do with you. What do you think about it? And then, because it's not attached to any person and there's no potential to lose face, people are much more open then to talk about their thoughts or their opinions. So this is the whole approach to how they extract information and make decisions. So it's very
Right.
much consensual, very much diplomatic, and very much group orientated. And like, how are we going to do this together, as opposed to, look, I'm here from the UK. This is my proposal. Do you want it or not? Yeah,
Yes.
that's always going to go down badly.
Yes.
My
Absolutely.
next tip would be obviously you're not going to be able to spend too long in the region, so there is going to be an element of virtual communication when you come back to the UK, wherever it may be. Avoid emails. Emails will get you nowhere very, very fast. If you want to get things done and you want to communicate something to your partner or whoever it is, your distributor, get on the phone or a conference call or a FaceTime or whatever it may be. You have to speak to people. Emails are still kind of this abstract entity in their culture. They don't have the same gravitas and meaning as they do in our culture. You need to appreciate that. So if if you want anything important done, get on the phone, then put it in writing afterwards as a kind of confirmation or a clarifier
Follow up.
as to what you've said. Yeah, as a follow-up. Exactly.
Yep.
Don't rely on
Absolutely.
emails to get anything done.
Good. Right.
And then my last one is patience. Things take longer because of this decision-making process, because of the hierarchy, because of the bureaucracy in many of these countries. So understand that things will naturally take longer. It's not a case of you being strung along or them weaving together stories to try and delay something happening. It's usually a case that there is a snag somewhere, or somewhere up the ladder something is going on. What you need to do is ideally have those relationships in place so that you can approach people that you have trust with and say, what's going on? What information can we add to help get over this? Or what can we do to help convince that this is, going to be the right way? So patience is absolutely key. Demonstrating or expressing any sort of displeasure with how long things are taking shows you don't know the local culture, and will show you and will cast you in a bad light as well. So patience, absolutely key.
Yes. Absolutely. I mean, some great tips there, Neil. Unfortunately, we've come to the end of our time, and I mean, I'm sure we could continue with discussion for hours and on end, because it's an extremely interesting subject. It's extremely important for companies to be aware of what they should and what they shouldn't do in this part of the world. So just to finish off, Neil, many thanks for your time today, and some great information and tips from you. So thank you very much once again, Neil.
Pleasure. Thank you very much.
Let's keep in touch. So thank you very much to everybody listening today. We do have a few questions, but what we will do, we'll come back to you via email on those. Just to remind you that we do have another webinar coming up on the 23rd of October. This will be the fourth in our webinar series, and this is all about intellectual property and what you should be doing and not be doing in ASEAN regarding protecting your products and services. So thank you very much all for listening, and I'll see you again on the 23rd of October. Goodbye.